Imagine yourself in such an intense confrontation that your whole life changes after it. Now, think that this confrontation was not with simple adversary, but with God himself. Does it seem impossible? For this is exactly the story of Jacob, one of the most enigmatic patriarchs in the Bible. He began his journey as a cunning man who used intelligence to achieve his goals, but ended as Israel, a name that carries powerful meaning. What happened along this way? Jacob's life was not just a succession of striking events, but a true spiritual transformation. Since his birth, he was already involved in a fierce dispute with his brother Esau, a conflict that would shape his destiny. He was mistaken to conquer, ran away to survive, worked to thrive until, at the most critical moment of his life, he had a meeting that would change everything. The fight at the Jabbok Vav was not just physically, but a battle for his identity and purpose. But what really happened in this fight? How has Jacob managed to survive a direct confrontation with God? And more importantly, what does this story have to do with you today? In this video, you will discover every detail of this fascinating journey and understand why Jacob's transformation still impacts so many people. So stay with me until the end, because this story can change the way you face your own walk of faith. Since before he was born, Jacob was already destined for a life of conflict and promises. His mother, Rebekah, realized something strange during pregnancy. The babies in their womb seemed to fight with each other. Intrigued, she sought a response from God and received an impactful prophecy. Her children would become two nations, but the oldest would serve the younger. This revelation contradicted the tradition of the time, for the firstborn always had more rights. But God was already writing a different story to Jacob. When the day of delivery arrived, Esau was the first to be born, but Jacob came close behind, holding his brother's heel. This detail seemed small, but revealed a lot about his personality. From the beginning, he demonstrated a persistent nature, someone who did not accept to be left behind. His name, Jacob, means a one who grabs or supplants, and that defined his way of acting. He grew up determined to conquer his space, even if he had to resort to cunning. But was Jacob's fate already sealed since birth? His story shows that God does not choose from human rules, but according to his own purposes. Even with questionable failures and attitudes, Jacob was part of a larger plan. And this rivalry with Esau was just the beginning. The following events would turn their lives forever. The right of birthright was extremely valuable in the culture of the time. The eldest son inherited most of the inheritance and assumed the position of leadership in the family. Esau, as a firstborn, had this privilege, but did not seem to give so much importance to him. Jacob, on the other hand, saw this blessing as something essential and was willing to get it. And the perfect opportunity came on an ordinary day when Esau returned from exhausted and hungry hunting. Tired and without patience, Esau ordered a plate of stew that Jacob had prepared. It was at this moment that Jacob made his bold proposal he would give the food, but in return Esau should give his firstborn right. Esau, impatient and focused only on his momentary need, belittled the blessing and accepted the exchange. At that moment, without realizing it, he was giving up a great future for immediate pleasure. And Jacob, even acting unquestionable, guaranteed himself what he wanted so much. This story teaches us a great lesson. How often do we exchange something valuable for a passing moment? Esau sold his right for a stew plate, and often we also give up important things for impulsive decisions. Jacob used cunning, but God had already determined that he would be chosen. What seemed like a simple negotiation would forever change the fate of these two brothers, and this rivalry was far from over. Isaac was already old and his vision weakened. Knowing that his time was coming to an end, he decided to bless his firstborn son, Esau. However, Rebekah, his wife, had other plans. Since the birth of the twins, God had revealed to her that the youngest would be chosen to carry the divine promise. Determined to ensure that this prophecy was fulfilled, Rebekah elaborated a bold plan for Jacob to receive the blessing in place of Esau. Quickly, Rebekah prepared a tasty dish for Isaac and wore Jacob with his older brother's clothes. To make the mistake even more convincing, He covered Jacob's arms with goat skin, as Esau was hairy and Jacob had smooth skin. Trembling with nervousness, Jacob entered his father's room and introduced himself as Esau. Isaac hesitated, but by touching his son's arms and smelling Esau's clothes, he was convinced. He then imposed his hands on Jacob and granted him the blessing intended for firstborn. When Esau arrived and discovered what happened, his fury was uncontrollable. He begged for a blessing, but Isaac had already given Jacob everything. Jacob's mistake generated an immediate consequence. Esau swore revenge, and Jacob had to flee to save his life. Little did he know that this escape would mark the beginning of a journey that would transform him forever. God already had a plan, and Jacob was about to discover him. With the threat of Esau, Jacob was forced to flee to the land of Haran, where his uncle Laban lived. The journey was long and lonely, and for the first time Jacob was truly alone. That night, exhausted, he found a place to rest and used a stone as a pillow. It was there, in the midst of the desert, that he had one of the most impressive dreams of the Bible, a ladder that connected earth to heaven, where angels climbed and descended. At the top, God spoke to him, reaffirming the promise made to Abraham and Isaac. This dream was not just a vision, but a clear message. Jacob was not alone. God was with him, guiding his steps, even in the midst of the consequences of his own choices. Jacob awakened scared and exclaimed, "In fact, the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know." Then he took the stone where he had slept, raised it like a memorial, and called that place of Bethel, which means house of God. It was a milestone of transformation in his life from then on. He knew that his journey was under divine direction. This experience marked the beginning of a new spiritual walk to Jacob. Before, he was a man who used his intelligence and cunning to guarantee his own future. Now he was beginning to realize that his true security was not in his plans, but in God's purpose. However, his learning journey was just beginning, and great challenges still awaited him. After his transforming experience in Bethel, Jacob finally arrived at his uncle Laban's house, where he met Rachel, the woman she fell in love at first sight. Determined to have her as a wife, he proposed an agreement. He would work 7 years for his hand in marriage. Time passed quickly, for his love for Rachel was intense. But on his wedding day, Laban deceived him and gave him Leah, the older sister. To marry Rachel, Jacob was forced to work 7 more years. This period at Laban's house was a real school for Jacob. The deceiver was now mistaken, proving his own poison. But instead of giving up, he persevered, learning valuable lessons about patience and trusting God. His years of service also resulted in a great blessing. His wives gave him children, who would later become the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel. Even in the midst of difficulties, God was shaping his character for the future. In addition to the sentimental challenges, Jacob faced injustices in his work. Laban changed his salary constantly, trying to explore it. However, God continued to bless Jacob, making him prosper in an extraordinary way. Wisely, he found a way to grow and guarantee his independence. But as its riches increased, the environment in Laban's house became increasingly hostile. It was time to leave and face a past he was trying to avoid. The years passed and Jacob's family grew rapidly. He had children with Leah, Rachel and his servants, Bilhah and Zilpah, forming the base of the 12 tribes of Israel. Each birth carried a deep meaning, for his children represented the fulfillment of God's promise. However, the rivalry between their wives brought conflicts inside the home, testing his patience and discernment. Even so, Jacob remained firm, knowing that God was guiding his story. At the same time, Jacob needed to guarantee his own prosperity amid the exploration of Laban. Using his intelligence and experience as a pastor, he developed a strategy to strengthen his flock without disobeying God. Under the divine blessing, the strongest, healthier animals began to be born under their possession, while Laban became increasingly annoyed by his prosperity. The man who once ran away from home with nothing now accumulated riches and influence. However, Jacob's success also aroused envy among the children of Laban. The tension in the house increased every day, and Jacob realized that he could not stay there for much longer. It was then that God gave him a clear order. It was time to return to his homeland. But that meant facing one of the greatest fears of his life, the reunion with Esau. After years of exile, Jacob received a direct order from God. It was time to return to his land. But this return would not be simple. He knew that, upon arriving, he would have to face Esau, his brother, whom he had deceived in the past. Fear took over your heart. Did Esau still guard a grudge? Would he seek revenge? To try to calm the wrath of his brother, Jacob sent messengers with valuable gifts, hoping to find grace before him. The messengers came back with a frightening news. Esau was coming to meet 400 men. Jacob's heart fired. Was that army a sign of war? Taken by anguish, he shared his caravan into groups, sending gifts ahead and positioning his wives and children strategically. He knew he needed to do something more and resorted to the only one who could really help him, God. In deep prayer, Jacob cried for divine protection, recognizing his full dependence on the Lord. As the night approached, Jacob was about to live the most transformative moment of his life. The confrontation with Esau was inevitable, but before that, he would face an even greater confrontation, a divine meeting that would change everything. That night, alone on the bank of the Jabbok River, Jacob found himself in front of a mysterious unknown. Without explanation, a combat began. They fought fiercely all night, without being able to beat each other. But Jacob soon realized that this was not an ordinary man. It was God, and even exhausted, he refused to release him. He understood that this was the moment of his transformation. Seeing his determination, God touched Jacob's thigh and shifted his articulation. The pain was intense, but Jacob didn't give up. "I won't let you go if I don't bless me," he cried. The man then asked a crucial question, "What is his name?" Jacob answered, and at that moment, his identity was changed forever. "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and men and prevailed." Jacob left that physically wounded, but spiritually restored struggle. His name, his history, and his faith were transformed. He was no longer the deceiver, but now a man who had fought with God and had survived. This meeting marked the birth of Israel, the chosen people of God. After years of separation and fear, the most anticipated moment had come. Jacob would finally meet Esau, but fear still consumed him. He remembered the wrath of his brother and the threat of death. Then he prepared gifts, divided his family into groups, and advanced the meeting, bending 7 times before Esau, showing humility and respect. But to his surprise, Esau was not there for revenge. He ran to meet Jacob, hugged him, and cried. The hatred of the past gave way to reconciliation. What Jacob feared did not happen. Esau accepted his gifts, but stated that he already had much. The forgiveness was sealed in that hug. God had worked in both Jacob and Esau over the years. This meeting shows that forgiveness can transform even the greatest conflicts. Jacob and Esau followed different ways, but broke free from the weight of the past. We often carry unnecessary bales, but when we give our pains to God, He opens doors to restoration. After reconciliation with Esau, Jacob followed his journey and established himself in Canaan, the land promised by God to his ancestors. There, his family grew up and became the base of the 12 tribes of Israel. His name, Israel, was not just a change in identity, but a milestone of the birth of a great nation. Each of his children gave rise to a tribe, fulfilling God's promise. Jacob's last years were marked by challenges and moments of deep emotion, such as the loss of his beloved Rachel and Joseph's apparent disappearance. But God had a larger plan. Years later, Jacob discovered that Joseph was alive and ruled Egypt. The reunion between father and son was one of the most exciting moments in the Bible, showing how God can restore what seemed lost. Before leaving, Jacob blessed each of his children, leaving a spiritual legacy that would echo for generations. He died in Egypt, but his remains were taken back to Canaan, symbolizing that his story did not end there. His life teaches us that even with failures and challenges, God fulfills his promises and transforms common stories into extraordinary purposes. The story of Jacob is a living proof that God does not choose the perfect, but transforms the available. He started as a misleading man, but ended as a patriarch of a great nation. His journey was marked by mistakes, escapes, and fights, but also by divine encounters, fulfilled promises, and a deep transformation. If God could change Jacob's life, he can change his own. How many times do we feel lost, insecure, or afraid of the future? Jacob went through this. He feared his brother, doubted his promises, tried to solve everything with his own hands. But it was at the moment of greater despair, fighting in the Val de Jabbok, that he understood God's blessing does not come by strength, but by delivery. Sometimes our greatest victory comes when we recognize that we depend on him. And you? Are you trying to solve everything yourself, or have you delivered your life into God's hands? The story of Jacob teaches us that even when we fail, God is ready to transform us. All he wants is a willing heart. Just as Jacob became Israel, God can give you a new name and a new purpose. The story of Jacob teaches us that God does not choose the perfect ones, but transforms the will. He took a man marked by mistakes and fears and made him the patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel. This means that your story can also be transformed, no matter your past, your flaws, or your struggles. The same God who changed Jacob is ready to change his life. Now, I ask you, are you willing to fight for your blessing? Jacob had to face his fears, humble himself before God, and persist to the end. Are you ready to persevere in your faith, even when everything seems difficult? Victory does not come to the strongest, but to those who hold on to God. If this message spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs that word. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so as not to lose the next content. And remember, no matter how much of your struggle, God has written a victorious ending for your story.